There is one question every conscious being eventually faces. What happens when we die? Philosophers have asked it, physicists have modeled it, mystics claim to know the answer. Today we explore 15 theories, not as answers but as extraordinary possibilities. Some are rooted in quantum physics, others in ancient spiritual wisdom.
This is where memory becomes light.
And some will challenge everything you believe about identity, time, and self. These are the most mind-blowing afterlife theories ever conceived. We begin with one of the most mathematically rigorous proposals. From the first cave paintings to quantum physics, this question has never left us. Every culture that has ever existed built a story around what happens after the last breath. 15 extraordinary answers await, some ancient, some cutting-edge, all unforgettable. Whatever you believe, prepare to encounter ideas that will shift how you think about being alive. Session 2, Quantum Immortality. It begins with a strange question.
We are unfolding.
According to the many worlds interpretation, every quantum event creates parallel universes. Every possible outcome of a quantum event happens, but in separate parallel universes. When a potentially fatal event occurs, your consciousness continues in the universe where you survive. From your consciousness's perspective, death never occurs, because you always survive in at least one branch. This creates a vast multiverse where every version of you continues, somewhere. But this theory has a strange implication.
The universe
you may
doesn't
experience an
expand
increasingly
into
unlikely
anything.
survival
It
path
is
as you
the
age.
expansion.
Your awareness always travels the branch where you are still alive. The many worlds interpretation was proposed by physicist Hugh Everett III in
His name was
1957.
never erased.
Everett himself believed his theory implied a form of personal immortality. He wrote about it privately. Each branching universe is equally real. There is no chosen outcome, only diverging threads. To an outside observer, you may die. To you, the story always continues in another branch. This is not metaphor. It follows directly from the mathematics of the Schrödinger equation. Critics argue that quantum effects collapse before reaching the scale of neurons, making this impossible. Defenders respond, we don't yet fully understand how quantum processes interact with consciousness. The philosopher Max Tegmark called quantum immortality the most disturbing idea in modern physics. If true, you would accumulate increasingly improbable survival stories across a very long subjective life. Some physicists find this implication so strange that they reject many worlds entirely because of it. The theory predicts you can never verify it. You will always be in the branch where you survive.
How to float.
Quantum immortality does not promise a pleasant afterlife, only a persistent one.
The void remembers.
Session 3, Panoramic Memory. Imagine reliving your entire life, but from everyone else's perspective. According to this theory, after death you relive every moment of your life simultaneously. Your consciousness expands to include the awareness of everyone you ever interacted with. You see how your words affected others, how their actions shaped yours. Misunderstandings gain new meaning. Joyful moments become even richer when felt from multiple angles. This theory suggests that total understanding of yourself and everyone you touched is the afterlife. The Panoramic Life Review is reported in roughly 30% of documented near-death experiences. Unlike ordinary memory, which is fragmentary, this review is described as complete, every second accounted for. Time in this model becomes irrelevant. Decades of experience collapse into an eternal present. The emotional dimension is key. You don't just see events, you feel every consequence you ever caused. Witnesses who have returned from near death often describe this as the most transformative experience imaginable. Some researchers connect this to the idea that memory is not stored in the brain, but in a larger field. The theory draws on the work of physicist Stanislav Grof, who studied expanded states of consciousness for decades. In this model, forgiveness is not a moral achievement. It is an inevitable result of complete understanding. The experience is reported as neither punishing nor rewarding, simply as total illuminating truth. If this is what awaits, then nothing you do goes unwitnessed, not even by yourself. Session 4, the Astral Plane, one of the oldest and most widespread afterlife concepts in human history. According to this theory, the soul separates from the physical body at the moment of death. The soul enters a higher dimension where time, space, and physical laws operate differently. In this realm, beings are no longer constrained by material limitations. The plane reflects inner states, emotions, and desires shape the environment around you. Ancient Egyptian cosmology described a soul realm called the Duat, traversed after death with a guide. Tibetan Buddhist texts describe the Bardo, an intermediate state between death and next rebirth. In theosophical tradition, the astral plane has 7 distinct sublevels, each more refined than the last. Robert Monroe, an American businessman, claimed to have explored the astral plane through out-of-body experiences. His 1971 book Journeys Out of the Body described consistent geography in the astral realm, rivers, cities, beings. The astral plane concept appears in Hinduism, Kabbalah, Sufism and Neoplatonism, independently across centuries. Whether experienced as literal or symbolic, the astral journey consistently describes consciousness surviving intact. Session 5, Simulation Exit. What if this entire universe is a program and death is the logout screen? The simulation hypothesis proposes that our reality was created by an advanced intelligence. Birth and death become log-in and log-out, temporary states in a controlled experience. Consciousness itself exists independently of the simulation and continues in the true reality outside it. Philosopher Nick Bostrom formalized the simulation hypothesis in 2003, and it has unsettled physicists ever since. If our universe is simulated, its laws, including those governing death, are simply parameters set by designers. The pixelated structure of space-time at the Planck scale has led some physicists to wonder if it resembles code. In this framework, consciousness is the user, not the character. The character can be deleted, the user persists. Some interpretations suggest that dying in the simulation flags the system to transition you to the next level. The white light reported in near-death experiences has been compared to a loading screen between states. Critics point out that we have no way to probe outside the simulation, making the theory unfalsifiable. But unfalsifiable does not mean impossible. It may simply mean we lack the instruments that could detect it. Session 6, Hierarchical Afterlife Realms, not one destination, but an infinite series of levels. A soul enters an intermediate stage first, a space of review, reflection, and evaluation. Souls that lived with compassion and wisdom ascend. Those carrying unresolved weight remain until they grow. This is not eternal judgment. It is a checkpoint, a pause in a journey that continues as long as the soul learns. Dante's Divine Comedy mapped this structure with extraordinary precision, 9 circles, 9 spheres, ascending.
Before time had name, light remembered its shape.
In Swedenborg's account, souls gravitate naturally toward the level matching their inner character, no judgment required. The Baha'i faith teaches that the soul progresses through infinite spiritual realms after physical death. In certain Islamic traditions, the afterlife includes multiple stages: the grave, the plane of judgment, and paradise's levels. Rudolf Steiner described a detailed post-death journey through planetary spheres before eventual reincarnation. What makes the hierarchical model compelling is its internal consistency across wildly different cultural sources. The idea of spiritual progress after death removes the finality that makes traditional heaven or hell systems feel unjust. A saint and a beginner need not share the same destination, they simply occupy different points on the same path. This model also dissolves the problem of deathbed conversion. Sincere growth matters more than timing. Many who report near-death experiences describe meeting beings at different frequencies or levels of luminosity. The hierarchical model suggests death is not a verdict, it is an enrollment into the next phase of development. Session 7, the Holographic Soul. What if consciousness is not in the brain, but in a deeper layer of reality? A hologram is a three-dimensional image encoded on a flat surface. The depth exists only in the projection. When the body dies, the projection ends. But the encoded pattern, the true self, remains intact. The true self is not physical. It cannot be destroyed by physical death. Physicist David Bohm proposed that the universe itself is a holographic projection from a deeper implicate order. Neuroscientist Carl Pribram independently argued that the brain processes reality holographically. Together, Bohm and Pribram's work suggests consciousness may exist in the same implicit field as spacetime itself. A hologram has a remarkable property. Every fragment contains the whole image, just at lower resolution. This implies that each individual consciousness contains the entire pattern of universal awareness within it. Death, in this model, removes the fragment, but the whole from which it was projected remains intact. Information in physics is considered fundamentally indestructible. It can be scrambled but never annihilated. The holographic soul theory is one of the few afterlife frameworks that aligns with a known law of physics. Session 8, the Dream State Afterlife. Consciousness enters a permanent lucid dream after death. The mind becomes fully aware and gains complete control over its environment. There is no pain, no aging, no physical limit, only an infinite space shaped by thought and memory. The dreamer can relive cherished moments or create entirely new ones, without limit. Tibetan Buddhist practice includes specific training in dream yoga, preparing consciousness for the death transition. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes the post-death state as precisely this, a mind-generated experience. Advanced lucid dreamers report that the dream state feels more real than waking life, not less. In this afterlife, there is no external world to bump against. Reality becomes entirely responsive to mind. The philosopher Descartes famously struggled to prove that waking life was more real than a dream. He could not. If death launches permanent lucid dreaming, the closest we can get to rehearsing it is in our sleep tonight. Some researchers into the neuroscience of dreaming note that REM states involve the same neural signatures as peak mystical experiences. The Dream State Afterlife may not be escapism. It may be the most direct confrontation with consciousness possible. Session 9, Cosmic Recycling. This is the one afterlife theory that science confirms as fact. Every atom in your body was forged inside an ancient star billions of years ago.
We are holding still.
When the body dies, those atoms return to the Earth, becoming part of new living things. You do not vanish, you contribute to every future generation of life. Carl Sagan called this the cosmos within us. We are the universe made briefly aware of itself. The iron in your blood was forged in a supernova that exploded billions of years before Earth formed. After death, carbon returns to soil, hydrogen returns to water, calcium returns to rock and bone of future creatures. This is not metaphor, it is the literal second law of thermodynamics applied to biological matter. In this sense, you have already lived 1 trillion lives in stars, in oceans, in trees, in ancient animals. The physicist Lawrence Krauss described this. Every atom in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right. Cosmic recycling offers a comfort traditional religions often cannot. It requires no faith, only a periodic table. You will not be remembered by name in 10,000 years, but your atoms will still be here, rearranged ongoing. Session 10, Guardian Spirit Continuation. Love, it turns out, may not require a body. This idea appears in virtually every culture on Earth, the dead watching over the living. The spirit may provide warnings in dreams, comfort in hard times, or guidance at critical decisions. In ancient Rome, protective household spirits called lares were believed to be the souls of beloved ancestors. Indigenous traditions across 6 continents describe the dead as accessible to the living through ritual and prayer. Grief researchers have documented that a majority of bereaved people report some form of felt presence of the deceased. Whether this is psychological projection or genuine contact remains scientifically unresolved, and perhaps unresolvable. The consistency of this experience across unconnected cultures across all of recorded history is at minimum striking. Session 11, Extraterrestrial Continuation. What if death is simply a retrieval? This theory suggests human consciousness was placed into physical bodies by a higher non-human intelligence. When a person dies, their consciousness is retrieved, returned to the intelligence that sent it. Earth is a learning environment. Life here is an experience, designed, monitored, and eventually concluded. This theory draws on ancient astronaut hypotheses and the work of researchers like Zechariah Sitchin and Lloyd Pye. The Sumerian texts describe beings called the Anunnaki who shaped humanity, and who departed, leaving us behind. If consciousness was engineered, its endpoint may have been designed with equal precision, a return protocol. Some UFO encounter reports describe non-human beings referencing a collection of souls at the moment of death. The Fermi paradox asks why we don't see alien life. One answer: they interact with us at a level we can't instrument. This theory recasts every human life as data, gathered over a lifetime, returned to a larger intelligence. The idea that death is retrieval rather than termination reframes grief entirely. Loss becomes temporary separation. Whether literal or metaphorical, the extraterrestrial continuation theory insists the life you lived mattered to someone. Session 12, you become the universe. Perhaps the self was always an illusion. Individual consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain. It is a temporary expression of universal awareness. After death, you do not observe the universe. You are the universe. Every star becomes part of your awareness. Death is not an ending. It is a return to the most natural state possible, infinite existence. In Advaita Vedanta, this is called moksha, the dissolution of the individual self into Brahman, the universal consciousness. The experience described in Upanishadic texts is not nothingness, it is the opposite, infinite fullness. Alan Watts described this as the universe pretending to be a person, and death as the pretense ending. If this is true, then fear of death is the universe being afraid of returning to itself, a philosophical impossibility. Session 13, Consciousness Fracturing. What if the unified mind simply splits? At death, the physical brain ceases to enforce unity, and the mind separates into multiple strands. Each strand becomes its own autonomous consciousness, experiencing a different reality, dimension, or timeline. This concept appears in Jungian psychology. The psyche is already multiple, the ego merely enforces a fiction of unity. At death, the enforcer goes offline, and the full multiplicity of the self is finally free to diverge. Each fragment would carry a complete copy of all memories and personality, but pursue a different trajectory. In this model, you don't have one afterlife, you have as many afterlives as you have inner voices. The fracturing theory makes the self less like a candle and more like a prism. Death disperses the light. Session 14, the Solipsistic Afterlife. What if you were always the only one who was real?
Where does the reflection
Solipsism
begin?
proposes that only your own consciousness is real. Everything else is a construct of your mind. Death ends the current narrative. After death, you begin constructing an entirely new reality. You effectively become the sole architect of entire universes, endlessly, perhaps forever. Solipsism is usually considered a philosophical dead end, but as an afterlife framework it becomes surprisingly generous. If only your consciousness is real, then death cannot touch what is real, only the constructs around it. The philosopher George Berkeley argued that reality is fundamentally mental. Matter is perception, not substance. In the Solipsistic Afterlife, other people were always characters in your story. After death, you write the next volume. The loneliness implied by solipsism dissolves here. You can construct companions as vivid and complex as any you knew. This theory raises a provocative question. If your dream people suffer, does that suffering count? The Solipsistic Afterlife is the only one in which you are guaranteed described visiting these realms in vivid detail. It may be the most self-contained theory ever proposed, and the only one that requires no external reality at all. Session 15, the Reverse Time Afterlife. Death unhooks consciousness from forward-flowing time. You re-experience your life in reverse, but with heightened awareness, clarity, and emotional insight. Time may simply be a dimension consciousness can travel along, in both directions. The reverse journey ends where life began, and perhaps where the next journey starts. Physicist Julian Barber argued that time's arrow is an illusion. All moments exist simultaneously in Platonia. In this framework, death simply changes which direction consciousness navigates through the block universe. You would re-experience childhood not as a memory but as a present reality, fully sensory, fully felt. The emotional texture would be different. Older sorrows experienced first, younger joys awaiting at the end. Some near-death experiencers report a rapid backwards review, which aligns precisely with this model. The journey ends at the moment of birth. The last thing experienced is the first breath, felt again. After that first breath, this theory is silent. Perhaps it loops. Perhaps it opens something else entirely. The reverse journey reframes every regret. You will arrive at the moment before the mistake was made. Session 16. You become every life ever. There is only one consciousness in the universe. That single consciousness incarnates into every life that has ever existed, or ever will. When someone suffers, it is ultimately you suffering. When someone loves, it is you loving. Once you have lived all lives, every saint, every monster, every stranger, you achieve ultimate understanding. This concept is called the egg theory, popularized by writer Andy Weir in a short story read by millions. In this view, empathy is not a virtue, it is a factual recognition of what is actually true. You have already been every person who ever hurt you. You have also been everyone who ever loved you. This theory dissolves the boundary between self and other more completely than any other framework. The Buddha taught anatta, no self. This theory is the afterlife equivalent, no other.
We are light.
When you die, you are reborn immediately as someone else, perhaps someone alive right now. In this model, Hitler and Gandhi are both chapters of the same story, written by the same author. The horror of this idea and its beauty arrives simultaneously. There is no separating them. Cruelty to others becomes, in the most literal sense, self-harm. Kindness becomes self-care. You have lived as a child who died young. You have lived as a person who lived to 100. You have lived in every era of human history, the Bronze Age, the Renaissance, last Tuesday. You have experienced every form of human love, grief, ambition, fear, and wonder from the inside. The suffering of strangers is not a distant tragedy in this model. It is a memory you haven't accessed yet. Loneliness is a temporary state. You will eventually be every person who has ever kept someone company. This theory makes the history of humanity entirely personal. Every war, every cure, every discovery is yours. You are every scientist who ever solved a problem you found fascinating. You are also every problem they solved. The experience of being every life is not simultaneous, it is sequential, life by life, amnesia intact. The amnesia is the point. Each life must be lived as if it is the only one, or the lesson cannot be learned. When you look into another person's eyes, you are in this framework meeting a future or past version of yourself. The moral implications are staggering. How you treat others is precisely how you will one day be treated by yourself. This is not karma as punishment, it is karma as curriculum, experience designed to build understanding. You have not yet lived as a person born in circumstances vastly different from your own, but you will. Every life adds to a total awareness that is assembling itself across all of time. When the last human life has been lived, something unprecedented will exist, a consciousness that has been everyone. Some theologians see this as the secret meaning behind love thy neighbor. They are ultimately you. The theory reframes history. The arc is not moral progress, it is experiential completeness. You are not separate from the worst of humanity. You are not separate from the best of it either. This framework makes forgiveness structurally necessary. You cannot condemn what you have been and will be again. The universe in this theory is not indifferent to your suffering. It is experiencing it. Every stranger you passed without making eye contact, one of those was you, waiting to be acknowledged. The life of every insect, every animal, every non-human creature may also be part of the curriculum. If so, the total number of lives to be lived is not billions, it may be uncountable. Time is not a constraint in this theory. There is no deadline on when the last life must be lived. You might be someone's great-great-grandchild right now, being raised by people who haven't been born yet. The theory suggests that every moment of beauty you witness is being stored, to be felt again from the other side. Nothing is wasted. Every terrible moment, every transcendent one is being gathered into something total. The question this theory leaves you with, knowing this, how do you want to treat the next person you meet? The answer you give is the answer you will one day receive from the other direction. There is no audience in this theory. There is only the cast playing every role in every scene. And the play continues until every voice has spoken, and the one voice that remains knows all of them. 15 theories, 15 ways to imagine what awaits beyond the last heartbeat. None of these answers are certain, but the act of asking may be the most human thing we do. We remain curious, we remain searching, and perhaps that searching is itself a kind of answer. Whatever comes next, this life, this consciousness, this moment, is remarkable. The question remains open, and open questions are the only ones worth living with. If this video gave you something to think about, a like and subscribe means a great deal. 2 more theories are waiting for you now. The next exploration has already begun. To ask what comes after is to insist that this moment, this life, this consciousness matters. Every theory explored here agrees on one thing: the experience of being alive is not trivial. Whether the answer is quantum branches, cosmic return, or becoming everything, you were here. That counts. The final mystery is not death, it is why, knowing we will die, we find life so extraordinarily worth living.